There's this thing that happens when you've been through something that really broke you open. Not the kind of hard that makes a good story at dinner parties. The kind that changed the temperature of every room you've walked into since. You came out the other side and you look fine. You function, you laugh at things. But something in you shifted and most people around you have no idea what they're actually looking at when they look at you. Because here's what nobody tells you about surviving the worst chapter of your life. You don't come back as a stronger version of who you were before. You come back as someone else entirely. And that someone has a very specific set of traits that only other people who've been through it can recognize. Let me show you what I mean. You probably have an unusually high tolerance for discomfort. Not because you're brave, not because you're tough, but because your nervous system has been so thoroughly recalibrated by what you went through that what most people consider stressful barely registers for you anymore. Your brain learned under extreme conditions what an actual emergency looks like. So now when someone's panicking about a delayed flight or a rude email from their boss, there's this quiet part of you that just watches, not with judgment, more like distance. Like you're standing on the other side of a window, looking at a version of stress you can't quite connect to anymore. Psychologists call this stress inoculation. It's the same principle the military uses in training. Expose someone to enough controlled intensity, and their threshold for what feels threatening literally moves. Your threshold moved. Except yours wasn't controlled. Yours was real. And that changes the math in ways most people don't understand. You also notice everything. And I don't mean you're observant in the fun, Sherlock Holmes kind of way. I mean you walk into a room and within seconds you've already clocked who's tense, who's pretending to be fine, whose smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. You read micro expressions the way some people read headlines. Automatically, without trying. Sometimes without even wanting to. This is hypervigilance wearing a very convincing disguise. When you grew up in or lived through an environment where danger wasn't always loud, where sometimes the most harmful thing in the room was the quietest person in it, your brain learned to scan. Constantly. It became your survival software. And even now, years later, in rooms that are perfectly safe, that software is still running in the background. You can't turn it off. You just got better at not letting people see it. Here's what gets me about this one. Most people who have this trait think they're just empathetic, and they are. But it's not just empathy. It's pattern recognition born from necessity. You didn't learn to read people because you were curious about human behavior. You learned because at some point reading people correctly was the difference between safety and something worse. And then there's the composure. You've probably been told you're calm in a crisis, that you're the person everyone turns to when things fall apart. And you are. But not because you have some natural gift for leadership under pressure. It's because your body has done this before. Not this exact situation, but this feeling. The free fall. The moment where everything tilts and everyone else freezes. You've been in that free fall so many times that your system just responds now. Efficiently. Almost mechanically. There's a term in trauma research called a post-traumatic growth. And it describes the way people who survive significant adversity sometimes develop capacities they didn't have before. Not despite what happened, because of how they adapted to it. Your calm isn't a personality trait, it's an adaptation, and the fact that it looks effortless to everyone else is part of what makes it so lonely. Because that's the other thing, the loneliness. Not the kind where you don't have people around you. You might have plenty of people, friends, family, a full life, but there's this specific kind of aloneness that comes from knowing that the version of you that other people interact with is edited, curated even, not dishonestly. You're not pretending. But there are rooms inside you that you've never let anyone walk through. And sometimes you're not even sure you want to. You've probably noticed that you have a complicated relationship with vulnerability. You can be emotionally articulate. You can talk about hard things. You might even be the friend everyone comes to with their problems. But when it comes to your own pain, something tightens. There's a gate. And it doesn't open easily, not because you don't trust people, but because some part of your brain still associates being fully seen with being fully exposed. And being fully exposed once cost you something you're not willing to lose again. This is the nervous system protecting what it almost lost. It's not a flaw. It's not emotional unavailability. It's a guard that was posted during the worst night of your life, and no one ever told it the war was over. You might also have this strange ability to detach when things get emotional. Not dissociate exactly, although maybe sometimes. More like you can step back from the intensity of a moment and observe it from a slight distance. You feel the feelings, but there's a part of you that watches you feeling them, almost like a narrator sitting quietly behind your eyes. That's called affect regulation. And most people have to spend years in therapy learning how to do it. You taught yourself probably when you were way too young to have needed that skill. Your mind figured out that if it couldn't stop the overwhelming thing from happening, it could at least create a little room between you and the full force of it. A buffer. And that buffer became permanent. Here's the part that I think most people miss about all of this. These traits, the composure, the vigilance, the emotional intelligence, the high threshold, they don't look like scars. They look like strengths, and they are strengths. But they're strengths that were forged in fire, and the fire left marks that most people never see. You might be the most put together person in your entire circle, and also the one carrying the most. Those two things aren't contradictory. They're connected. And there's something else that tends to show up in people who've survived real hardship: a low tolerance for inauthenticity. You can feel when someone is performing, when a conversation is surface level, when someone is saying the right things but meaning none of them. It almost physically bothers you. Because when you've been through something that stripped you down to the bone, you lose patience for anything that isn't real. This isn't you being judgmental. It's you having been so close to what actually matters that the trivial stuff just can't hold your attention anymore. Your filter for what's meaningful got recalibrated along with everything else. And honestly, this one surprised me too, but research on post-traumatic growth also shows that people who've endured extreme difficulty often develop a deeper sense of purpose. Not always right away. Sometimes it takes years, but somewhere in the aftermath of what happened, something quietly reorganized inside them. Priorities shifted. What used to feel important stopped mattering. And things that once seemed invisible, connection, presence, integrity, moved to the center. You didn't just survive what happened to you, you metabolized it. And what came out the other side wasn't damage, it was depth. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not romanticizing pain. What you went through wasn't a gift. It wasn't the universe testing you or shaping you for some greater purpose. It was hard, maybe unfairly hard, and you deserved better, but what you did with it, that's yours. The way you rebuilt, the instincts you developed, the emotional fluency you carry now without even realizing how rare it is, that's not something anyone gave you. You built that, in the dark, without a manual. And the thing about people who built themselves in the dark is they tend to notice the light differently. Not more optimistically, not in some toxic positivity way, but more carefully, more deliberately, like someone who once almost drowned doesn't take breathing for granted. So, if you recognized yourself in any of this, I want you to sit with something for a second. The traits you just heard described, you probably never framed them as post-traumatic growth. You probably just thought, that's how I am. But how you are didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere very specific. And understanding that, really understanding it, can be the beginning of something that feels less like surviving and more like actually living. If this hit close to home, I'd love to hear from you. Not because I need the engagement, but because there's something powerful about someone in the comments, reading your experience and thinking, that's me too. That's exactly what I couldn't put into words. And maybe that's enough for today.